Why would we accept Martin Luther throwing out 14 books of the Bible?
Why wouldn't we?
Why would we?
Because he was wrong.
Apocryphal.
Yeah, when they're saying 14 books, usually people say, Martin Luther, in a unguarded moment around his table talks, after having too much beer, which he can kind of do, said that James was a right strawy epistle, because he thought James disagreed with Paul, because James says that faith without works is dead, and there is no disagreement there, but Luther thought there was, and so he thought we should just kind of throw that out. Then there was another controversy between the Protestant Reformation and the pseudepigrapha of the Old Testament that the Catholics had accepted as, in fact, the church as a whole had accepted as sort of a second-class canon, but never in the full canon. And that was just sort of a church tradition. It was no big problem until the issue of purgatory broke out, and then some Catholic priests quoted from 3rd Maccabees, I think 2nd or 3rd Maccabees, which was one of these questionable texts, second-class canon texts. And then Luther said, wait a minute, the church tradition says you can't build a doctrine on those texts. And the Catholic Church said, yes, we can. And so then when Luther published his Bible, he took those 13 books, which had always previously been sort of a second-class canon, and excluded them. And then the Catholic Church went to the other extreme and said, no, they're fully authoritative. And so we had two new things being created, sort of a hardening of the categories. The Protestants said they have no value at all, and so they're just like every other book. And now the Catholics saying, no, they're fully inspired.
Yeah, the reason that Protestants today don't want to say, well, we do that because Martin Luther overreacted and we want to follow him. The reason today that Protestants would say, and we should not bring them back in, is because these are intertestamental Jewish texts, okay? So they're written by Jewish folk between the two testaments, and the Jews themselves have never seen those texts as fully authoritative. In other words, they don't turn up in the Jewish Bible. So for that reason, Protestants today say if the Jews themselves didn't recognize them as part of the inspired text of the Old Testament, we shouldn't be putting them in our scriptures either.
And Jesus never quotes from them. But in terms of, is it ever possible for a person to say, I don't think the church made the right decision on this book and therefore it should be thrown out? From my perspective, I wrestled with this a number of years ago when I was reading 2 Peter, and I didn't like it. It was like, this book really, it just seems a little, harsh and, it's just lacking grace and whatever. And some scholars argue that maybe it wasn't written by Peter because the style's a little bit different and things like that. So I was wondering, maybe I could do a Luther thing and kind of just throw it out. But see, here's the thing. That is the epitome of arrogance, at the very least. It's the epitome of arrogance. The folks who accepted these works early on as authoritative, their life was on the line. I mean, first of all, they're very close to the early tradition. They're in a much better position to know than we are, and they paid for it with their blood. And now here we are 2,000 years later, and you got a bunch of academics who have been, Jesus seminar calling into question the canon. We need to revisit the canon. I find that to be just so utterly, utterly arrogant. You scholars who've got nothing to lose, except you get to publish some books and make some money because you're creating a lot of controversy. You're going to now question the decision of these early Christians who paid for it with their blood. And the church all throughout history has accepted these. I just think that is, smacks of arrogance. And so on that basis alone, I'd say the question of the canon, I think, is off limits. This is what we have, and so we receive it along with the historic church.